they should focus on one thing in general, rather than lots of different things that you're not sure about. Because if you're starting out, everything looks like an opportunity. So the correct answer is all of them are opportunities, but all of them won't work unless you pick one, right? And so you have to say no to all the other mistresses. So boom, you pick one. And then from there, I always say 6 figures is sell something to someone. That's it. And if you want more detail, sell something to someone. So it's one avatar, one product, one channel. So you don't have to figure out, how do I create 20 pieces of content across? It's like, just pick one channel, one media source, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, Twitter. Consistently start going on that, whether that's cold outbound, whether that's content, whether it's running paid ads, whether it's affiliates, word of mouth, whatever it is, and start reaching out to people there to start selling your stuff. And so if you can just do that consistently, and I use something, all right, you have to learn how to advertise, which I define as the process of making known. So how do you let other people know about the stuff you sell? So you have to advertise. There's 6 ways to do it. I covered 5 just now. So there's 6 ways you can do it. And then once people engage with whatever advertisement you have to sell them. So advertising is the first skill, selling them is the second skill. And
Makes
then
sense.
Product would be the third skill, which is the thing that you're ultimately advertising and selling. Doing the same thing consistently. So usually once people do it in the beginning, they're sporadic, they're not consistent with it. Just the act of doing the same thing every day usually gets people to 100,000 a month, which sounds crazy to probably people listening, but most people who think that's crazy also haven't done it consistently for an extended period of time. And so I use something that I call the rule of 100, which is 100 primary actions, whether that's 100 minutes of content creation per day, 100 reach outs per day, $100 of ad spend per day. Like you have to pick one of them, but 100 per day, and you do that for 100 days, and I promise you you'll be making 6 figures if you do that. I think it's fear mostly. I know that's not a skill, but I think it's a character trait. And so people are afraid of not getting validated, or they're afraid of judgment that they perceive from other people that exist or don't exist in their lives. And so for whatever reason, they have this second voice that criticizes everything they do that in reality isn't even there, but is constantly present. It's like the antithesis of whatever the God figure is, but just the negative voice. And so I think that's the thing that stops most people from doing the stuff they know they need to do. Because if you think about like, whether it's want to get in shape, or I want to have a better marriage, or I want to make more money, most people on some level, at a basic level, they know what to do. And my proof point of like even making money, right? Most of us have had a bill that came up that was unexpected, a tax bill, a car breaks down, a health thing, whatever it is, and we find a way. And so when it's for someone else, people are use the actual resourcefulness that they have to make the money, but for whatever reason they won't use that same resourcefulness to make it for themselves. And so I think that most people know if they want to work out, to get in shape or to lose weight, whatever, they know they need to eat fewer donuts and move more in general, but they don't, right? Because they're afraid of getting started, or they don't have the discipline to keep going, which is they can't make the short-term sacrifice for the long-term achievement. So big picture, it's like there's usually some fear that's preventing from doing it, and then how it looks from a behavioral standpoint is they do not make the short-term sacrifice of discomfort for the long-term achievement. I think at that point, the reality of my situation was so bleak that I honestly didn't even process the reality of my situation, because the more I thought about it, like the sadder, more hopeless I would feel. And so I focused on the few things that were under my control, which is like, I can do these things. And so when I talk about advertising, when I talk about selling, I talk about those things boiled down to the actual actions, because I had to think of it in that way, because it was the only way that it wasn't overwhelming. It's like, I just have to make 100 reach outs, or I just have to spend $100 a day, and I have to look at the ads, and I have to turn off the ones that are bad and do more of the stuff that starts to work. And that was the process of getting me from kind of like dark to a better outcome. But I mean, from that actual point, we did the only thing we knew how to do, which was market and sell, and that was how we got out of that. And honestly, that single skill of being able to generate leads, independent of the industry, has been like my get out of jail free card, which has allowed me to fail over and over and over again until finally, I got it right. And even after that one, when we were at the rock bottom there, I had just, 90 days earlier gotten a DUI. My mom was in the hospital, really bad shape. That's when I had just lost all the money, which is when I pulled her aside. But then fast forward 6 months, basically repeated the cycle again, which is we had started doing these launches where we'd fly out and turn gyms around like bar rescue, but for gyms. And when we were out there, all of a sudden we came back home and we saw like 2 of the gyms refunded all of the transactions because they just told the people they could just sign up through them and just do it for half the rate after we had already spent the money for the hotels and the flights and all the ad spend and every, a whole month of work. And so basically all the money that we had saved up in that, like, I think we're out of jail free, lost it all again. And only then did we accidentally pivot into the licensing model, which ended up becoming the thing that was like the first very big success that we had. But like that whole period of time was 5 years of basically not having anything. Even though on paper, when I had the gyms, I materially looked successful because we had 6 locations. But I always just put all my money back into each new location. So I had very little actual cash. I was asset rich and cash poor.
I know the drill.
Yeah, right. And so, but then when I lost everything after that, because I sold them, took the money, put in the new venture, and then lost it, I was like, wait, I just lost 5 years because I had nothing to show for it. And so that's probably what has created a lot of the hypothesis I have now around, I didn't lose the 5 years. I lost the assets which were not the most valuable thing that I had earned over that time. It was the skills, the experiences, the character traits, because I still had those. And then using those 3 things, I was able to do the next thing, fortunately. Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying with the learning thing, because I think a lot of people that like the early, because I feel like 2 parts of the audience that like follow my stuff. I've got the business owners who are trying to scale their business, et cetera. And then I've got all the people who want to start a business. And usually they're a little bit younger and whatnot. And I think there's a misnomer around like education. And so a lot of them, I don't know how explicit I can be, but like they mentally masturbate to watching lots and lots of videos. They, want the pump up speeches, they buy the tickets to the things. And so they just learn. And I think that they think that exposure to information is learning. And I don't think that's true, or at least it hasn't been for me.
It's definitely not true.
So, because I'm sure you get asked all the time, like, what are the books that, transform your life? And I've had a handful of books that have been useful to me, but I would say 99% of the things that I've learned through doing. And so when I do the original rule of 100 and whatnot, it's because I think it's the most effective way to learn, which is you force yourself on the one controllable that you have, which is the activities that you can take. And then it goes with the underlying assumption that you go off feedback and you're like, well, that opening message did not work.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think most people have a dramatic underestimation of how much volume it takes to be successful, independent of the thing, right? They're like, okay, I should go on 5 dates and then find the girl I'm going to marry. It's like, what if it was 500 to find the right girl you're going to marry? Or I want to, start this new channel, or I want to become an influencer, whatever it is, and they start doing, 1 post a day for 4 weeks, and they're like, why am I not famous yet? And they find, real,
so
right?
True.
And they find out that like, we ended up doing 400 episodes before we made it to the top 10 on the podcast thing. And now we start doing, 100 plus pieces of content a week. And it's just this volume game that you get the skill from the volume, the feedback from the volume. And there's all these like little things. I'm sure it's like from the exercise world, because you come from that. Like when you squat, the first time you squat, you're orienting yourself to your environment. You're barely actually squatting. You're just looking like you have a bar on your back. But you learn so much between that first rep and your 10,000th rep of squats. And so I think for most people, it's like, my goal, like with the learning, is like, if I can just decrease the action threshold for people to begin and be okay with the fact that they're going to suck, and it is okay to suck. You should expect to suck. And it would be unreasonable for you to be good if you haven't done it before. And so it's like, are you asking the universe to be unreasonable for you by expecting to be good on your first try? And I think that's where a lot of people, it's the expectation that destroys their ability to be successful, because they expect to win on the first shot, and no one does.
Do you worry at all about people wanting to be on camera right from the jump? Because that puts an expectation to be good that,
yeah,
that's rough.
I think it's so much easier, like, if we're, so many feelings about this. So you've got this whole space, right? And you look at, like, if you're like, I want to be a business influencer, right? Well, it's like, well, you look at the guys who are actually the top of the business game, and virtually everyone, you, Andy, Ed, Gary, all those guys have killed it in business. And most of them, even Gary, had gone to 60 million a year before he made his first content. And so I think the issue is that people look at that and say, I should make content like them, when you can't answer the underlying question, which is, why should I listen to you? Right. Which is always in the back of every audience's mind, in my opinion. At least that's what I think. Like when someone's like a relationship expert and I find out they've been divorced 3 times, I'm like, maybe not. right? I mean, and as terrible as it is, they might be giving amazing advice, but it doesn't pass the first filter, which is, if I'm going to take military strategy from someone, I'd rather have a general that has a winning record, even if the other guy, Napoleon, said, I'd rather have lucky generals. So even if he had two that were even, he'd rather have the lucky one. And so to the same degree, I think people use that filter because it actually takes less effort to learn from someone that you trust. And so it's like, if you've got the basement teacher that's telling you to dollar cost average into the S&P, and you've got Warren Buffett who's telling people to dollar cost average in the S&P, they don't want to listen to the teacher, even if the teacher is better objectively from a constant standpoint, because they just don't know if they should trust them. So you have to have two filters. I'm hearing the thing, should I trust the thing? With Warren, you can just plug into whatever he's saying and just take it as truth, which takes less effort. And so I think most people don't get that point. And so I think you should make content, but you should advertise the stuff that you sell, let people know about what you're doing. But it should be about the true expertise that you have, which is oftentimes just talking about the stuff you're doing, rather than saying, you should be doing this. This is what I am doing. Hope you find it interesting. Hope you find it valuable. And I think that's a big dynamic, which versus like how to, it's how I, just that little shift. And I think a lot of people would get much bigger, better audiences and actually make more money from the content that they're making, because everyone else is like, why should I listen to you? So, and to be clear, Dad, I would say that the vanquishing thing is something that I was able to kind of recognize in retrospect, which was, it was all about beating my dad earlier on. So, and a lot of that was because I felt like a lot of the respect was withheld from me earlier on, and it was always like a moving target, which is, if you need to be this, you need to be that, you have to be in shape, you have to date hot girls, you have to be top of your class, you have to play all the varsity sports, like all those things, right? Be editor-in-chief of the newspaper, be editor-in-chief of the literary magazine, all those things at the same time. And still, if I got something wrong on a test, it was like, what'd you get wrong? Rather than, this is cool. I'm not
got 99 right.
Yeah, I'm not boohooing about it. It is what it is. It's made me who I am, and I'm grateful for it. But that was kind of the earlier part, was I wanted to win at the game that had been set up for me. And first it was make $100,000 a year, and then it was make the same amount as my dad, and then it was make more than my dad, and then it was make more than my dad had ever made in his entire life. And then once that happened, I looked around and I was like, I think I've been playing his game and not my game. And so I wasn't really setting any rules. I was just playing with the rules that were given to me. And so, and kind of thing like, is this even the game I want to play? And so that, that took me, a little bit of time to process. And I think that it ultimately, to your question, I think it did serve me a lot. And I don't know how much of these reinforced behaviors that I learned during that period of time still benefit me today, but they're not fueled by the same thing. So I still have these habits of how I work and being dedicated towards goals, et cetera, that I think were born of that, but no longer are fueled from that now. And so there's three traits that people, then they looked at, because they were trying to find habits of highly successful people, and when they actually pulled apart, it's not, and I hope I'm not contradicting anything, but there's people who are really rich who wake up really late and work really late, and there's people really rich who wake up really, really early, and there's people who are really rich who eat really healthy, and there's people really rich who drink Coca-Cola and eat French fries every day. And so there's all these things that we want to make as truths, but there's easy examples that counter those things. So it's like, what are the few things that are true, or at least that seem to be present in all of the situations? And it seems as though there were surprisingly few. And so the three common traits that they had found were, one, that people have a superiority complex. They believe they're better than others, and they believe that they deserve more than everyone else does, and that they can accomplish big goals, right? So they have a bigger vision because they believe they deserve it, or whatever it is, that they were able to identify that. The second thing that they were able to identify is that they had crippling insecurity, and which is a paradox of paradoxes. They feel they'll never be enough, and they'll always be measured against the things that they've achieved. And so you've got this crazy dynamic between they think they're better than everyone, they think they deserve more, they want to go after this big hill, and at the same time, they fear they'll never be good enough, and they'll never actually achieve it, and they actually suck. And then the third piece, which kind of adds the beautiful mix of this, is impulse control. And so they're able to control their actions and focus on a single thing for an extended period of time. And so if you put those three things together, it's like you've got a big goal that's pulling you this way, you've got this big fear that you are running away from, and then you've got impulse control to keep you focused on the one thing that matters. And if you do that, if you are the type of person who has those traits, then you are very likely to be successful. So to the marshmallow point, because I think this is really interesting and I don't think it's talked about enough, which is they like to separate the kids into the two buckets, right? Like the kid who waits for 2 marshmallows and the kid who just says, I want the marshmallow now. But I feel like they should have a third bucket, which says, how long do they ask the kid to wait for the marshmallow, right? Because it's not, do you have, like, because I like to think of things in, like, a lot of times we have false dichotomies, or we have binaries where we're like good or bad, you know, disciplined or undisciplined, I'm honest or dishonest, right? When I think more reality is, to what degree am I honest? To what extent am I disciplined? To what degree am I, you know, loyal, right?
Oh God, there's a whole conversation.
Yeah. And so I think that each of those 3 traits that we just went over, it's not do I have them or not for the people who are listening, because people like to think, yes, I have it, or like, oh, well, I have all 3 of those. It's not having them. And I'm sure you've interviewed some of the most successful people on the planet. It's how much do you have?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that, like, your ability to delay gratification, it's not just like, oh, I can wait a week or I can wait a month. But I made this tweet that went pretty viral. And it was like, if you can wait a year, you can make a ton of money. Like, if you can do something for 12 months, you can not need for financial goodness pretty much for the rest of your life. I'm not saying you're going to be hella rich,
right,
but you're not going to need for anything if you can wait 12 months. If you can wait a decade, you're going to be above the 1%. If you can wait 10 years for an outcome, be able to do the doing without seeing the result for 10 years, you will be able to be above most achievement of most people. And if you can wait a lifetime and you don't even need to see the result of your doing this, even while you are alive, but know that it may get done after you pass, then I believe that you can change the world. And I mean that. And so I think that if people can just extend the time horizon that they're measuring themselves on, they can just do so much more. I mean, you've probably heard the Bill Gates quote where he says, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. I think it's the same thing, just continue to draw it out. And I think as we've been able to, you know, achieve more leverage and make more money, et cetera, my horizon has extended. And when I listen to the people who I want to emulate, I can almost tell by the measurement of money that they talk about and the measurement of time that they discuss how successful they are or how successful I think they're going to be. Like, if I talk to a 25-year-old and he's talking about what he wants to do in 2 decades and his whole plan of what he's going to do, as long as he's not just blowing smoke because he's heard an interview from me, then I'm like, this kid's got it. He gets it. He gets it. And most people just don't think they can't wait 90 days. Most people can't even wait a month, right? They start a diet and 14 days later they don't have a six-pack and they can't wait. But like, if you do a year, you can look whatever way you want, for the most part, you know, by and large. And if you wait a year for the ability to learn how to sell, you wait a year for the ability to learn how to market, wait a year just providing value to a group of people for free and then delaying your ask, you can do whatever you want.
It's really smart.
How do we have as few of those as possible, and how do we have that those need to believe statements are as high likelihood as humanly possible, right? So it's like, like if we had a business that was reliant on an inflationary period or something, I'd say like, okay, well, I believe that that's, you know, it's high likelihood that it's going to occur. Okay, so I feel okay about that one. And if that was the only thing I need to believe for this whole business to be successful, I'd be like, where do I write a check? This is the only thing I need. So it's how many of these are there, right? And if there's a lot of them, then with each additional line, our likelihood of getting the outcome we want goes down. And so I think that if reversing that for success for somebody who's coming along is like, what amount of action would it be unreasonable for me not to be successful? And so for me, it's like, I believe that if you do 10,000 cold calls, you'll get better. Like, it would be unreasonable for you not to be good. Like, after that level of effort. If you run, you know, if you take half your paycheck every month or a third of your paycheck every month and you say, I'm going to advertising university, which is I'm going to spend money actually advertising, trying to get people to click on this thing and give me their name and phone number. If you go and you spend that amount of money on actually advertising, after a year, after 2 years, you'll probably be pretty good. Especially if you join a community of other people who are doing the same thing, right? You got mentors who have done and give you frameworks that you can just work off so you can shortcut your path to success. It becomes unreasonable that you wouldn't be more successful in the future than you are today. And so I like thinking about things in terms of directionally correct rather than will I hit it or not, right? I think there's so many binaries because it's easy psychologically for us to say yes, no, honest, dishonest, etc., successful, not successful. But it makes making decisions really hard. Because you're like, is this the path for me? Is this the product, the business I'm going to start? Whereas like, well, if I started something, I would be more likely to be successful than if I did not start anything. And from there, I will gain experience and perspective to then make the next iteration on the main thing. And was Quest your first thing ever?
First successful thing.
But you'd done other stuff before that and failed. And I was like, I hope Quest wasn't his first thing. Most people had...
Thank God it wasn't,
right.
To be honest.
Most people had a graveyard of failures before they had their actual first success. And so most people spend all this time a different tweet that went viral. It said, like, with 20 hours of focused effort, most people can be pretty decent at something, whether it's guitar, it's singing, even cold calling. If you actually cold called for 20 hours, focused effort, you'd be decent. But most people spend years waiting to do the first hour.
Whoa.
And so it's like, how can I decrease that action threshold and get someone to just embrace the suck? And so it's like, how can I normalize no's? So it's like, if I'm teaching somebody to sell, it's like, dude, I need you to get 100 no's. All right, just get 100 no's for me. I don't care about the yes, just get 100 no's. And the thing is all of a sudden, if the no becomes the goal, then they realize that it's about the process and not the outcome, and then they will become better salespeople because they stop being afraid of it. The same thing, like, for training a salesperson, I want them to hear the gasp, right? Which is like, you say a price over the phone. Everyone's afraid of saying the price. It's like, dude, if you didn't get a gasp, you didn't go high enough.
Right.
And they're like, what? I'm like, oh, you failed. Terrible sale. They didn't gasp. They're like, really? And so then it flips it and becomes a point of pride. It's like, oh, I got her. You should hear the gasp on this one. And so all of a sudden they stop being afraid. We normalize, we do like exposure therapy on the things that people are most afraid of. And I hope that with all the stuff that we do, that we can do that in a microwave for at least a handful of people. So they just start doing and realize that they're going to gain perspective, and the light of their knowledge will give them the next foot. But the thing is, they're stuck on the first one trying to pick the first path when they had no idea what they're doing. So when I quit my job, my dad's buddy was in private wealth management in Merrill Lynch. And so he called me up and was like, hey, you should sell for me. And I, to this day, and he jokes about it now with me, I said, oh, sales? I was like, I'm not a salesman. I was like, I'm an academic. You know what I mean? I just come from, unrivaled, and I thought whatever. And then lo and behold, I signed my lease, I slept on the floor, and I was like, how do I pay rent? And woman walks in the door, and I was like, I need to get her to give me money so I can pay rent. And I was like, oh, this is sales. And I didn't know. So for me, it was just begging people to give me money in the beginning. I was like, I promise I'm going to give you the best results ever. But the idea of sales was I thought it was beneath me. I thought it was scammy. I thought it was used car sales, just like the abhorrent, that'd be the right word. But and then through exposure, I realized that it was, and I ended up, in life's irony, being something that I've really fallen in love. Why aren't you creepy? The best interview question I've ever had. So I think a lot about this because I'm outlining the next book, so the next book is Leads, and I'm already done the draft, and you know how that is, where I'm like, oh, I'm not done that book, but like, I'm like, I can't wait for the next book. And so I'm thinking through, like, what is it that sales is overall, right? It's structuring a conversation to increase the likelihood that the person who's on the other side gives you money. That's what it is. It's structuring that conversation that way. And
structuring that conversation. I heard you mention something that you call, and I am so only vaguely aware of, like, proper sales. But you said holding the frame.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like, it's not about the words you say, it's how you say them and whether you can hold the frame.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by structure of the call?
All of it. Yes. I mean,
so what is the structure? What is holding a frame? Like, what does that mean?
So I love sales. So when two people interact in general, no matter what, man, woman, child, whatever, two frames collide, and I believe it's animalistic, whatever it is. There's a decision of who is alpha. Now, the alpha is also contextual, and so you can be alpha in, like, the president of the United States is alpha everywhere until he goes into a doctor's office, he tells him to pull his ass and he sticks his finger out, right? Frame, right? In that room, doctor is king. Right? He is the alpha in that setting, in that context. And so the ability to hold the frame for most salespeople is really having it sounds crazy, having a clear agenda and controlling the conversation, which is, why are we here? Right? Because a lot of sales is clear communication. Because if you clearly communicate, because the biggest advantage that a salesman has is that the person has already said they have a problem most times. Right? So if someone responds to a content piece and says, hey, can you help me? They've already enunciated they have an issue, they have a problem. And so you already have the inherent advantage of the frame, which is, you said you needed help, I'm here, how can I help you, right? And so it starts with that, right? It's being clear about why we're here, and then we get agreement that we understood the problem that they said they had next. And then from that point, we have to turn the desire into a decision, which is, okay, you say you want these things, here's the frame that I want to give you to analyze the decision. Can we agree to this frame, right? And so, for example, if I were selling marketing services, and whenever we rework a sales script with any of the portfolio companies, which is one of the things that we do to make them grow, a lot of times they have all this gobbledygook, right? And so I like the shortest possible scripts we can, because a lot of communication is wasted, right? So what happens a lot of times on a sales call is they say hello, build rapport, talk for 30 minutes, see that there's time that's running out, and then realize they have to pitch, right? And so then they motor mouth and then just awkwardly ask, right? And it is, to your point about it seeming icky, right, or sucking, is that it's not normal human communication, and you're not providing value to the other person. And so if giving clarity to someone on a decision is tremendous value. And so if you can sell in a way that clarifies a decision, my objective always, when I teach sales, the goal is not to get the person to buy. The goal is to get the person to decide. And I believe that people don't decide for only 3 reasons. And this comes from Albert Ellis, this is not me. But people blame all the woes of their lives on circumstances, other people, and then ultimately themselves.